social media is what made the whole thing blow up. I know in my country, it's not like we never had racists, bigots, anti-Semites, homophobes. Of course they were there, but it was kind of like a herpes. If it's in your bloodstream, you're not getting it out of your bloodstream, but your hope is for it to remain asymptomatic. So we thought we had built levees. We thought that no major political party would ever give a megaphone to such crazy voices as that. For a while, that seemed to hold. But then we had a combination of two very dangerous elements. Number one, the way social media allows anyone a platform, plus a very malignant, narcissistic political figure who was not above stoking and harnessing those forces for his own political purposes. At that point, the levees fell. And now people can say things that are so outrageous that, it's like I remember hearing Sacha Baron Cohen saying if Hitler were alive today, he would be taking out 30-second ads on Facebook. There's no healthy shame in the public sphere. And of course, the blowback against that has been cancel culture, which brings its own problems with it. Of course, what we need is to get back to an ethical center within our own hearts. So then the question becomes, well, did the breakdown of the ethical center within our own hearts then create this shamelessness in the public sphere, or did the shamelessness in the public sphere create this lack of ethics in our own hearts and in our own behavior? And I think it's both. It's both and. However, I also think in response to your actual question, which is, do we have to understand the pathology? Not really. You can't analyze the darkness to get to the light. In the presence of light, darkness is gone. And in the presence of love, fear is gone. Love is to fear what light is to darkness. So a radical commitment to love one another really is the ultimate answer. It's that which says, don't put that tweet up. It's kind of mean. Don't find another way to write that email that's a little bit more respectful. That kind of honing of our attitudinal muscles, it's kind of yoga of consciousness. As we go through those changes in our own being, we become different political and social activists than we would otherwise be, because we are not willing to forego our commitment to righteousness in order to try to make political change. Many times what people used to say is, well, the means is justified. The end justifies the means. But what Gandhi said is that the end is inherent in the means. If we don't become more peaceful people, if we don't become more loving people, then we will not be able to help in any meaningful, fundamental way, create a more peaceful world.
That's beautiful. I think of my experience in the last 2 or 3 years, just being exposed to, one, the conversations online, being part of them, experiencing cancel culture, experiencing reactivity, also experiencing my response to political divide or what I feel like are unfair policies or whatever it might be. That I found at first my anger was doing exactly what you're saying. I would post something that wasn't explicitly harmful, but it was implicitly harmful. Like the energy that I was posting something about, like, let's say, for example, I just remember this cartoon with like a kid on the lap of his dad and saying like, oh, how do we get to tyranny? Or so, it was something like that. And the dad saying, oh, well, it's when we fall asleep. And it was condescending in its approach. It wasn't helpful. I was angry. I remember I had a friend point out that a lot of when I get into that state, I'm creating the very division I'm trying to heal.
Me too. Snarky Marianne, sarcastic Marianne, condescending Marianne.
I got him.
I mean, we're not perfect enlightened masters yet. And of course, the problem, I think you mentioned the word before, reactivity. If you meditate in the morning, the chances of you writing that snarky email are drastically decreased, because the anger is really just the expression of the stress that we're all feeling. I mean, nobody has any impulse control these days. My mother used to say, count to 10 before you say anything, but my mother was alive before there was texting. Texting and Twitter just is such a temptation to express your immediate impulse, no matter how fear-based, dark, or angry it is. And we know how those algorithms work. I mean, they're all set up on social media to hook us into that space. So I think that's why there's a big conversation about detaching from that grid. On the other hand, look at you and me right now. this wouldn't be happening if we didn't have these capabilities.
I think a lot about the social media platforms and how, since they monetize our attention, and they, in a lot of ways, depending how we interact with them, and I've certainly experienced this myself, is that we unconsciously often start to curate our content then to maybe either create enragement, that's not my style, or create more engagement. But then what I've been thinking a lot about is, because it's being extracted through us for profit, we actually become conduits of extraction if we're not mindful, because there's literally like thousands, I would imagine, or at least hundreds of behavioral experts who are adjusting these algorithms. Like, we almost have to say, like, put the thing down, step away. Like, what do you recommend for that?
Well, I think every individual has to make their own choices, but you're absolutely right. People realize it. It's the freaking Matrix. It's that movie, it was a Social Conundrum. What was it called?
Social Dilemma. Yeah.
Yeah, Social Dilemma. I think all of us have come to see, I've seen that myself. Marianne, you're addicted to this thing, put it down. We all know that we're hooked. And we also know the ways in which, like you said, there's positive, first of all, there are positive results of the fact that we have those tablets. And more than that, they're not going away. The internet is not going away. That's why ultimately the answer really is spiritual. The answer is ultimately the self-regulation that comes from a dedication to a more integrous life.
What composes then a more integrous life?
Well, I think there's one truth. It's spoken in many different ways, different religious philosophies, spiritual philosophies, some of them more doctrinaire, some of them secular. I'm a student of A Course in Miracles. It doesn't have a monopoly on truth. No system has a monopoly. The Course is a psychological training in the relinquishment of a thought system based on fear, and a substituting that thought system with a thought system based on love. I'm a Jewish woman. I do transcendental meditation, and I do A Course in Miracles. None of those three are any better than any other path. Some people do Kabbalah, some people do Buddhism, some people do mystical Christianity, whatever. But people are understanding. There is a spiritual yearning. Even a lot of people who left behind institutionalized religious entities then came to realize, well, wait a minute, I threw away the baby with the bathwater. I didn't mean to be throwing away God. I just meant to be throwing away institutional doctrine and dogma. So there's a great hunger now, a great practice, and people are beginning to understand. So this is what I know in my own life. When I wake up in the morning and I do my lesson from the workbook of A Course in Miracles, I have a different nervous system that day than I would have had I not done that. It's just like physical exercise. Just like with physical exercise, you're honing your physical muscles so you can move through the world most powerfully. With spiritual exercise, you're honing your attitudinal muscles in order to achieve the capacity to be still and non-reactive. There is an internal guidance system within all of us, that small, still voice of God, of love, of whatever. But the ego speaks loudest. The ego speaks first. The voices of fear dominate the world and dominate popular culture and dominate social media.